Here's the rewritten version with improved clarity, flow, and engagement. They asked her to leave without an explanation, but Karoline wasn't about to let that slide. Here's what happened next. Karoline sat in her usual corner booth at the Oak Room, the cozy bistro she had frequented for years. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was her sanctuary, a place where the waiters knew her name, where the manager always stopped by to check in. The day had started like any other. After a long meeting, she came here to unwind. The familiar aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air, mingling with the soft of conversation and clinking glasses. From her window seat, she watched the world outside, noting the small changes in the neighborhood. The new businesses, the ongoing construction, the occasional parade down Main Street. She was scanning the menu, her mind still racing from the morning's events, when she noticed a new face among the staff. A tall, middle-aged man in a sharp suit. He had a clean-shaven face and an air of authority. She had never seen him before, but new hires weren't unusual. When the waiter approached, Karoline ordered her usual grilled salmon with a side of roasted vegetables. She smiled, already anticipating the meal. But before the waiter could leave, the suited man stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low but firm. Karoline looked up, confused. "Yes, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." His tone was blunt. Karoline frowned. "Pardon me? You need to leave now," he repeated, more insistent this time. He wasn't angry, but there was urgency in his voice. He stood a little too close, his posture stiff, as if bracing for an argument. Karoline glanced around. Other diners were sneaking glances in her direction. No one spoke, but they were watching. Something felt off. "Can you tell me why?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the quickening of her pulse. The man hesitated, as if considering his next move. Then he clasped his hands in front of him and said coldly, "I don't need to explain." Karoline's heart pounded, but she didn't let it show. She had seen power plays before, people who thought they could push others around just because they could. "Actually, I think you do," she said, her voice calm but unwavering. "I've been coming here for years, and I've never been treated like this. If you're asking me to leave, I deserve to know why." The man pressed his lips into a thin line and glanced over his shoulder at the manager, who stood near the kitchen door, watching. Strangely, he made no move to intervene. Why wasn't he stepping in? Karoline felt her frustration simmering, but she held it back. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the principal. The suited man finally spoke again. "You're disturbing the other customers." Karoline blinked. "Disturbing?" She looked around. The other patrons were quietly eating, chatting, sipping their drinks. There was no commotion, no scene. "This is a public place," she said. "I'm just here for a meal. I'm not disturbing anyone." The more she spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Something else was going on. She squared her shoulders and met his gaze. "I'll leave," she said, "but only when I understand why I'm being asked to go. That's only fair." The manager still hadn't moved, his eyes locked on her. Karoline felt his stare burn into her, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't going anywhere until she got the truth. Was this just a mistake? Or was she about to uncover something much bigger? Karoline's heart skipped a beat. "She had some concerns about you." Concerned? About her? That didn't make sense. She hadn't done anything wrong, and she had no idea what the manager was talking about. Concerns? What kind of concerns? Karoline asked, her tone firm yet controlled. "You're telling me I've been coming here for years, and suddenly the owner has concerns about me? What happened? I need to know." The manager hesitated, his eyes darting to the man standing beside Karoline. The man seemed uncomfortable, but said nothing. Karoline could see that he was still trying to figure out how to navigate this delicate situation. But she wasn't going to let him off that easily. Not anymore. "I'm just a manager. I don't know all the details," he muttered, shifting from one foot to the other. "But I think it's something to do with the way you've been. Well, the way you've been engaging with other customers lately." Karoline raised an eyebrow. "Engaging with other customers?" she repeated, disbelief edging into her voice. "What exactly are you implying?" The man beside her suddenly stepped in, his voice low but urgent. "Look, it's not about you, okay? There was a misunderstanding about some of your interactions with other guests." He swallowed hard before continuing, as if carefully choosing his words. "The owner thought you were, making others uncomfortable." Karoline blinked, completely taken aback. This was the first she'd heard of anything like this, and it made no sense. She had always been friendly, polite, and respectful to the other patrons. Sure, she was outgoing and social, but never in a way that would make anyone feel uncomfortable. This whole situation felt like a twisted game, and Karoline wasn't going to let them play her. Making people uncomfortable? Karoline repeated, her voice rising slightly with confusion and frustration. How? In what way? I've been here for years, and I've never had a complaint about my behavior. If someone felt uncomfortable, they should have said something. But I've never, not once, been told that I was doing anything wrong. The manager glanced nervously at the man again, but this time, the man remained silent. Karoline could see that the walls around them were starting to crumble. She wasn't just questioning the situation anymore. She was calling them out for their inconsistency. The manager looked down, avoiding Karoline's gaze. "Look," he said, his voice quieter now. "I don't want to be in the middle of this. I'm just doing my job. But if you want to talk to Joan, maybe you should give her a call." Karoline felt a surge of triumph, but kept it contained. She wasn't going to settle for an apology in a simple phone call. No, this wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about making sure this kind of treatment didn't happen again. "Fine," she said, her tone sharp and decisive. "I'll call Joan. But before I leave, I need to hear the truth. No more vague excuses. No more dodging the question." The manager opened his mouth to respond, but closed it again, his words trapped somewhere between regret and frustration. Karoline could tell that he was finally seeing how much he'd messed up. As the silence stretched on, she stood tall, her confidence unwavering. This wasn't just about defending herself. It was about making sure her voice was heard. But what would Joan say when Karoline finally made that call? Would the owner admit to her mistake? Or would the situation spiral even further? Karoline took a deep breath, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the table. She could feel the weight of the moment, but she wasn't going to let it overwhelm her. She had fought for the truth, and now it was time to hold the people responsible accountable. The manager had already begun to show signs of remorse, but that wasn't enough. Karoline wasn't here for half-hearted apologies. She wanted to hear from Joan herself. "Give me a moment," Karoline said to the manager, her voice steady. She wasn't asking for permission, but she was giving him the space to react. She pulled out her phone and dialed Joan's number, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The phone rang twice before Joan answered, her voice warm and familiar. "Karoline, it's been a while. How are you?" Karoline took a second to compose herself before responding. "I'm fine, Joan, but I need to talk to you about something urgent. I'm here at the Oak Room, and I've just been asked to leave by your manager with no explanation whatsoever. And to make matters worse, I'm being told that I've somehow made other customers uncomfortable. I need to know why this is happening." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Karoline could almost hear the gears turning in Joan's mind as she processed the situation. Joan had always taken pride in making sure her restaurant was a place of comfort and respect. This didn't sound like the kind of issue that would have escalated this far, without something going wrong. "Karoline, I'm so sorry," Joan said after a pause. "I had no idea any of this was happening. I trust my staff, but if there's been a misunderstanding, we need to sort it out. What exactly happened?" Karoline's frustration melted slightly at Joan's genuine tone, but she stayed focused. "I've been a loyal customer here for years, Joan. I've never had an issue with anyone. Not once. If someone had a problem with me, they should have spoken up. But no one did. I'm being told there was a complaint about my behavior, but no one has told me what I supposedly did wrong. I was just trying to enjoy my lunch, and now I'm being asked to leave." Joan let out a frustrated sigh. "I am so sorry for this. I've known you for years, Karoline. You've always been respectful and polite. If there's been any confusion, it should have been handled differently. I'll have a word with the manager immediately." This isn't how we run things." Karoline could feel her heart slow as the weight of the conversation settled. She wasn't just getting an apology. She was getting accountability. Joan wasn't making excuses or trying to brush the situation under the rug. "I appreciate that, Joan," Karoline said, her voice softening. "But this isn't just about me. It's about making sure this kind of thing doesn't happen to anyone else. I don't want to cause trouble, but I can't just let this slide." "I understand, Karoline," Joan replied. "I'll fix this right away. You deserve respect, and I'll make sure the staff knows that moving forward. I want you to feel comfortable when you come here." The conversation ended with Joan promising to handle the situation. Karoline hung up the phone and turned her attention back to the manager, who stood there awkwardly, avoiding her gaze. The man beside her had disappeared into the background, likely retreating to avoid any further confrontation. The manager cleared his throat. I've spoken to Joan. She's very upset about what happened and has promised to make things right." Karoline nodded, satisfied with Joan's response, but not quite ready to let the manager off the hook just yet. "I appreciate you talking to her, but this whole thing could have been avoided if you had just communicated properly. I was a paying customer just trying to enjoy a meal. I shouldn't have been treated like this." The manager looked down, his face reddening. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I should have handled it differently. I'm really sorry for the way this went down." Karoline's expression softened. Apology accepted,